which is a monthly international Zoominar with the general theme focusing on language, society, and education. The Zoominar is proudly hosted by Graduate School of Universitas Negeri Jakarta. Today, we are fortunate to have with us our visiting lecturer from School of Education, University of Leeds, the United Kingdom. We will be sharing his preliminary thoughts on what might an ethnography of higher education in Indonesia look like. This certainly will be an interesting session as Hywel Coleman will be sharing his expertise on this matter. Because we start the session, we would like to hear welcoming remarks from Rector of Universitas Negeri Jakarta, Professor Komarudin. Professor Komarudin, the screen is yours.
Okay, thank you. Now? Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi
Waalaikumsalam.
The Honorable Speaker of the Zoominar program, Mr. Hywel Coleman, from School of Education, University of Leeds, UK, Professor Dedi Purwana, the Director Postgraduate Program and the Board of Vice Director, lecturers, and all students of postgraduate program. I'm pleased to welcome you all at this monthly Zoominar program with an interesting topic, what might an ethnography of higher education in Indonesia look like? Preliminary thoughts. Like other topic in the previous webinar, I believe this topic is very interesting. This is possible in the context of research in social and behavior sciences, including language education, as I understand, in an ethnography, data are collected through observation and interview which are then used to draw conclusions about how societies and individuals function. Ethnographers observe life as it happened instead of trying to manipulate it in a laboratory. I believe Mr. Coleman will talk about it in details. Ladies and gentlemen, before I end my speech, I appreciate this Zoominar. This program is done consistently every month to sign the effort of UNJ to go global, to be a world-class university. On behalf of Universitas Negeri Jakarta, I must extend my gratitude to Mr. Coleman, who has been with Pastor Sarjana UNJ for ample time, and sharing his expertise in this Zoominar. My appreciation also goes to the Director of Postgraduate Program and the Board of Vice Director, and also all the coordinators of the study program who have made this event possible. Ladies and gentlemen, especially lecturers and students of postgraduate program, please enjoy the discussion in the Zoominar. I'm very sure you can take many benefit from it. As request to open this Zoominar, with your permission, I declare this Zoominar officially open. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you for your remarks, Professor Komarudin. Now,
welcome.
Please welcome Professor Dedi, Graduate School Director of Universitas Negeri Jakarta, who will give his remarks. Professor Dedi.
Thank you, Professor Aita. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. The Honorable and our respected Rector, Professor Dr. Komarudin, the highly distinguished speaker, Dr. Hywel Coleman, and also my colleagues, Professor Dr. Arita, as a coordinator of Development Center, and also collaboration at postgraduate program Universitas Negeri Jakarta. My head of study programs within graduate school of Universitas Negeri Jakarta, ladies and gentlemen. Postgraduate of Universitas Negeri Jakarta are very pleased to invite Dr. Hywel Coleman in this Zoominar event. For your information, Dr. Hywel Coleman also in this flyer stated that he is a lecturer from School of Education, University of Leeds, UK. But right now, our government has granted Dr. Hywel Coleman as Indonesian citizen. I believe he is more Indonesian than me. Dr. Hywel Coleman has been initiated the firstly Zoominar. At the time, he came with Dr. Faisal Madani to my office and discussed about whether international Zoominar can be executed at postgraduate of Universitas Negeri Jakarta, because his initiation, I believe, and at the time, I executed that this program is good. This program is matched with Universitas Negeri Jakarta vision and also postgraduate vision that we want to be a reputable university in Asia region. So such kind of Zoominar is very benefit for us when we promote our expertise, our business core, especially for in education, to all around the world. Thanks to Dr. Hywel Coleman and also Pak Faisal, who has been initiated this program, and I'm happy because at the first time we launched Zoominar, only less than 100 participants who joined this program. But right now, as Dr. Hywel Coleman told to me, there's more number of participants, nearly 400 participants right now. Thank you for Dr. Hywel Coleman and also Dr. Faisal Madani, who has been a great effort for us to do this international Zoominar. Please, participant, enjoy what Dr. Hywel Coleman will share with you and discuss with Dr. Hywel Coleman everything about his topic right now. Thank you very much and enjoy the Zoominar. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Professor Dedi. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, we will start our main session. Our resource person is Hywel Coleman. He was educated at the Universities of Oxford in the first degree in English Language and Literature and Lancaster University in postgraduate degree in Applied Linguistics. He taught for 14 years at the University of Leeds and still retained a close link with this institution. Now he is visiting lecturer in Universitas Negeri Jakarta. For the participant, we expect you to actively join the discussion during the question and answer session. You can give your comments on or raise question in the chat box or directly ask Hywel Coleman. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Hywel Coleman. Okay.
Thank you, Ibu Arita. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. Part of the reason that I'm speaking today is I didn't succeed in finding another speaker. So I decided to fill the slot myself. But a more interesting reason is that in last month's Zoominar, Peter Carey talked to us, and I can see that he's attending. Thank you for coming, Peter. He had a very controversial title, Why Has Indonesia Never Had a Nobel Prize Winner? And during his talk, I thought of many, it reminded me of many things that I've wondered about in the past, things that I've noticed and observed, and even some things that I've done research, small-scale research into and written about. So I thought this might be an opportunity for me to explore those thoughts again and share them with you in the hope of getting feedback. So what I'm going to do is not a carefully thought out presentation. It's not a report on research. It's simply some rather random initial thoughts about higher education in Indonesia. And as Pak Rector has already explained about ethnography, I will not be making any judgments. I'm not going to make any criticisms. I'm simply going to tell you what I've observed, information that I've come across, things that people have told me, things that I've read about, and will attempt to make sense of them as far as I can. In many cases, it's not yet possible for me to make sense of them. But please be assured that I'm not here to criticize. And also, as Director pointed out, I am now Warga Negara Indonesia, so I love this country the same as everybody else here does. Right, thank you. That's my introduction. So now I'll hope I can find my... Can you see the PowerPoint?
Yes, already.
Okay, good. So the title is what might an ethnography of higher education in Indonesia? What would an ethnography of higher education in Indonesia be like? Some preliminary thoughts. There are 10 sections to the talk, and most of them have question marks by them, as you see. So I'm not...
Sorry, Hywel. It didn't work out. The PPT is not running. Maybe you can stop sharing screen first, and after that you share screen again. You open the PPT first. Okay,
Oh,
already.
Yeah, we saw it.
Of contents. Can you see the list of 10 items? Nobody's answering me.
Yeah, hello. Go ahead.
Yes,
Oh,
already.
okay.
10.
Okay.
10.
Okay, right. Thank you. So as I was saying, these are mostly questions which reflects the ethnographic approach. I'm investigating. I don't have any answers. And I certainly don't have recommendations to make for further development. So as Pat Rector explained, in doing an ethnography, we may interview people, we may observe what's happening, we may give people questionnaires, we may use already existing documents in an attempt to describe and understand a particular context. Sometimes it's interesting to compare a particular phenomenon in one context with a similar phenomenon in another context, not because we want to say that one is better or worse, or more useful or less useful, but because by seeing another version, our thoughts may be expanded. We may think of things, aspects that we haven't thought of before. So I'm going to give you an example, nothing to do with education, on eating a meal. How do people eat meals in different contexts? And here you can see some people eating a meal. I won't tell you anything about where it is or who they are. The title that I put at the top is the Tibetan tea syndrome. This is a phenomenon that many ethnographers refer to. The idea is that when we hear the word tea, something comes to our mind. And we all drink tea. We've all had tea many times. And so what we think of is the sort of tea that we're familiar with. If I'm used to drinking tea in Java, and then I go to France, I will also drink tea, but it's different. Not hugely different. I can still recognize that it's tea. It might not be as nice as Javanese tea, but anyway, I recognize it. But if I go to Tibet and I drink what people in Tibet call tea, I will be horrified, because Tibetan tea is made from dead caterpillars. People believe that drinking tea made from dead caterpillars is good for their health. But this is so different from the tea that I'm familiar with that it shocks me. So what this shows us is we have to be very careful about the way that we interpret a term. Tea may mean one thing in one place, but it may mean something very different in another place. And we need to keep that in mind while we're looking at education in different parts of the world. Okay, so here are some people having a meal. Now I'm going to try to show you an alternative. Bottom part. Okay.
We cannot hear the sound.
Can you not hear the sound?
Yes, I think before you start sharing the screen, you should click the sound on the left button.
Video. This one.
You stop sharing, and then you start sharing again, and you click the sound.
Probably it doesn't matter very
Okay.
much. You can see from the video what's going on. So what's happening here is somebody is explaining how to arrange the plates and the knives and forks and spoons on a table ready for a meal. And this is a big contrast with the example we saw before of people eating rice.
Yes, tremendously different.
Yeah. Now, in order to understand these two very different approaches to eating a meal, we need information. First of all, we need to know who is eating and who is cooking. Is it the same people who are doing the eating and the cooking? If not, who are they? What's the relationship between the eaters and the cookers? Is it employer and employee? Is it husband and wife? Is it guest and host? There are many possibilities. Secondly, we need to know, is this the way that people eat meals every day? Or are these special events? If they're special events, what counts as a special event? Is it a religious festival? Is it a visitor coming to a house? Is it a family event? There are many possibilities. So we can't make any judgments. We can only describe, in these two different contexts, people eat meals in different ways. And what I'm suggesting is that this is the way that we need to think about education in general in different contexts, and higher education in Indonesia in particular. Now, before we come to Indonesia, I'm going to show you some data from the UK. So as outsiders to the UK higher education, here is some data for you to look at and see if there's anything interesting about these four extracts of data. First, from the University of X, there's an announcement about Professor YZ's inaugural lecture on the 27th of April. And at the end of the invitation, it says, there will be a drinks reception after the lecture. The second example is the annual report of the Debating Society in a university in Britain. And the report says that the speeches and the following panel discussion were lively and entertaining. They demonstrated the quality of political discussion in XXX University, especially when assisted by wine. The third example is an invitation to a retirement celebration for Professor AB, who is retiring. And this will be followed by a drinks reception from 6:30 p.m. And then the last example is from FGH University with an announcement for alumni, the FGH University Alumni Society monthly drinks in London. And the last monthly drinks will take place on the 2nd of May. Is there anything that strikes you about these four documents from four different universities in the UK? Maybe somebody can give an answer. Would anybody like to suggest something? Just unmute yourself for a second. No? No. Okay. What strikes me as an outsider now to UK higher education is drinks, wine, drinks, and drinks. Drinks here means alcoholic drinks. So we can see that in higher education in the UK, alcohol plays a role which appears in several different contexts. To an outsider from Indonesia, this would seem very strange, I think. Now, this is the sort of thing that we're looking for in Indonesian higher education. What is it that we can see which might seem strange to an outsider? So first, some background information about higher education in Indonesia, just some statistics. The history of higher education in Indonesia began in the 1920s with 3 faculties without universities. And in 1928-29, there were 259 students in the whole country. The first universities as we know them were established in the 1950s. That's just 70 years. Universities in Indonesia have been in existence for just 50 years. Now, as we know, 2 ministries are responsible for higher education, Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Religious Affairs. And the situation has changed beyond imagination in those 70 years. There are now more than 3,000 institutions of higher education under the Ministry of Education and 699 under the Ministry of Religious Affairs. That means in total, there are 3,806 universities or other higher education institutions in Indonesia, which I think is the 2nd largest in the world after India, more than China and 3 times the size of the USA. So the growth from 3 in 1950s to 3,806 in the 2020s is phenomenal. And you can see the total number of students now, 7.9 million plus 576,000. So about 8.5 million students in higher education in Indonesia. So higher education is huge and also very complex. Two ministries and different types of institution, Institute, Sekolah Tinggi, Academy, Polytechnic, Universitas. What this means is that we must be very careful about making generalizations about anything that we find. And of course, we also have to bear in mind the great heterogeneity of Indonesia, stretching from Aceh to Papua. So anything that I say to you is based mostly on what I've seen and observed and experienced. It may be completely different in your own institution or in other parts of Indonesia. Right, now, publications. As we know, everybody's being encouraged to publish, and data based on Scopus. So these are publications which appear in conference proceedings and journals which Scopus processes. This year, there have been, well, it must be the last year, 312,000 publications. This means that on average, each lecturer has produced 0.96 publications in a year. I'm making no comment. That's what the fact is. According to the Times Higher Education World University Rankings this year, the top university, the highest ranking university is Universitas Indonesia, which comes into the 201st to 250th ranking in Asia and 1001st to 2000 in the world. In the next category, 2001 to 2200, there are 9 Indonesian universities. I know that there are other ranking systems which may have different results. And I think the whole business of ranking is highly questionable anyway, so we don't need to take this too seriously. Okay, who goes to Indonesia? Who goes to a university in Indonesia? This is very, very interesting. The first table makes use, this comes from UNESCO Institute for Statistics, published a couple of months ago. In 2017, the last year for which data is available because of COVID, the percentage of the population that finished senior high school was 91% for the richest people in the community, the population, but only 32% for the poorest. So rich people are 3 times more likely to finish secondary school than the poorest. An immediate implication of that is that the people who go on to university are, of course, the people who finished secondary school. So this means that rich people are 3 times more likely to be eligible for university compared to poor people. Among the adult population in general, people aged 30 to 34 who have spent at least 4 years in university, a quarter of the richest have done, and only 1% of the poorest have done. So this means that rich young adults are 25 times more likely to have been to university than poor people. Now, if we come on to literacy and numeracy, this is data from PISA, which is well known, a test which is administered every 3 years, most recently in 2018. It's given to pupils age 15, about the end of SMP. And UNESCO has analyzed that data from PISA to look at the richest and the poorest members of the community as well. What we know already about PISA is that Indonesia, unfortunately, performs very badly On average, from about 45 countries that participate, Indonesia is near the bottom, 43 or 44, usually next to Morocco. Indonesia and Morocco always go together. Now, from that very poor performance, the people who show high literacy, there are not many of them, but some of them are among the richest. 4% of the richest achieve high literacy, 53% achieve low literacy. The poorest, on the other hand, no one who is poor achieves high literacy, and only 18% achieve low literacy. There are a few in the middle, but many of them are below low. So it's possible in PISA to be below the low level. In numeracy, it's not very different, as you can see. So again, if we're thinking about people who have potential to go on to university, there are serious problems here. Some people have the potential in terms of finishing high school, but in terms of literacy, not many people have potential. And if you're poor, you have almost no likelihood at all of getting into university. I'm sure there are exceptions, and I'm sure you will be able to tell me about exceptions, but this is the general picture. I'm not making a comment, or at least I'm trying not to make a comment. So, let's what is a professor in Indonesia? We don't need to read all of this. This is on data from the website of the Directorate General of Higher Education, and an in-depth interview which I carried out with a lecturer in a university a few days ago. What is clear is that the requirements to become a professor in Indonesia are very detailed, extremely detailed, and require evidence of having taught for at least 10 years at different levels. You must have moved up from assistant athlete to lector kepala, and so on. You must have accumulated 850 credit points. You must have done some research with funding from the findings must be published. You must have published at least 5 articles. So that means, on average, you must have written 1 article every 2 years. You must have done a little bit of public service, pengabdian masyarakat, which must be followed by a report, which must be published in a book, and the book must be given an ISBN and copyright granted by the Ministry of Justice and Human Rights. You have to do a lot of teaching. You must have done a lot of teaching, and you have to continue to do a lot of teaching and supervising no more than 10 students at the same time. All of this data has to be uploaded to the link that you can see at the top. So bearing all of this in mind, I am asking myself, what are the characteristics or the skills that are required to become a professor? This needs more research. I think having all of this data here has made me think all this data, all these different things is immense, time-consuming and exhausting. And I've heard some people say that it's so exhausting that they just give up. They don't bother any further. Right, I see it's 4:30 already. And let's think now about what professors need to be and need to do in the UK. These are 2 job adverts last week. One for a professor of engineering biology and one for a professor in applied mathematics or statistics. Main responsibility of the engineer: lead and undertake high quality research. For the applied mathematics or statistics guy, further develop the department's research and provide research. Sorry, you can't see. Whoops. Maintain a consistent high level output of publications and presentations, so on. Requirements: For the engineering guy, a research profile of international standing, evidenced by high quality publications, commitment to developing, maintaining a program of high quality research, the applied mathematics person, potential to carry out research that has originality and so on. It's very clear here that the focus is entirely on research. There's nothing, actually in one of them, it does say must be willing to teach students, but it doesn't say how much. And it's obviously not a highly important. Overwhelmingly here, the requirements are to be well known in your field and to have published a lot and to have the potential to continue publishing and doing research. So if we compare these people with this person, it's different. The jobs they have to do are different. The characteristics that they have to possess are different. And therefore, my suggestion is we can't compare them. We can't say that some of these are good, some of these are bad, some are strong, some are weak. They have different jobs and they're supposed to have different characteristics. I'd be interested to hear what you think about that. Next is something about relationships. When I began working in a university in Indonesia in 1980, 40 years ago, I observed a lot of lectures, maybe 100 over a period of 4 years. And I was struck by something that I saw frequently and I couldn't understand it. Here's an extract from an article I wrote about it a few years later. When the lecturer asked students to repeat sentences in chorus, some responded. But the fact that the lecturer was talking did not mean that the students had to listen. Some students would read novels or write letters. Others gathered in small groups and chatted. Others moved around the classroom, consulting friends and exchanging cigarettes. And I saw this sort of behavior again and again and again. When I talked to the students, they didn't think that this was in any way surprising. And they showed a lot of respect for the lecturer. They were very proud of their lecturer. And then more recently, a few years ago, quite recently, I carried out some observations in other universities, and I found something very similar. In this case, towards the end of the session, the lecturer tells the students to write down a question, which he dictates to them. He asks them to work independently. Only a small number are active. Other students were slumped on their desks. They were not paying attention. They were smiling at their friends and whispering with their neighbors and looking at their mobile phones. And again, when I talked to the students, they didn't think this was surprising. They didn't think that this was being impolite. And in both cases, the lecturers themselves weren't surprised. They seemed to think that this was normal practice. I struggled to make sense of this. And then I thought of perhaps a parallel with the behavior of audiences in wayang kulit presentations. I often watch wayang kulit performances, and I've noticed that the audience behaves rather similarly. People move around, they chat to their neighbors. They may be talking about the performance. They may be talking about something else. They may go out and get a cup of coffee and come back again. I've tried very hard to find a video of this sort of behavior, but I can't. But I will try to show you a short video of the Pesinden. No, try again. Oh. No, sorry, it's too it's too complicated. What's interesting is that there are 3 Pasindem sitting next to each other. One in the middle is singing. The one on the left is chatting to somebody off screen, and the one on the right is looking at her mobile phone. So this highly sophisticated, very moving art form, even then, informal behavior is acceptable. It's not surprising. Becker and Yang in 1979 talked about this and said that there is no assumption that everyone will be interested in the same things at the same time. Someone will always be dozing. The setting for a wayang is non-compulsive. Then the third phenomenon that I've observed is sambutan, dresses by officials, usually government officials, at opening ceremonies or closing ceremonies or other formal events. Again, I noticed the audience may be paying attention, they may be paying little attention, or they may be paying no attention at all. They may be chatting to each other. But the person who is speaking is very highly respected. So my suggestion is that the way that people behave in university classrooms, the way that people behave in wayang kulit performances, and the way that people behave in sambutans has many similarities. The common features are the performer performs for the duration of the event. The performer is highly respected. The audience may or may not pay attention. And for the audience and the performer, lack of attentiveness does not imply lack of respect. So my suggestion is that what we see here is a type of ritual. According to Clifford Geertz, he says, while attending a wayang performance, one is safe from all harm. Palmier says that the sambutan speeches re-emphasize the status quo and the relative rank of all those who are present. And my suggestion is that university education provides intensive training for future government officials, inculcating a highly developed sense of status and awareness of the proprieties required for the maintenance of society. I won't talk about this because we're running out of time already. So next is, what are universities for? Going back to what we were saying right at the beginning about ethnographic ways of looking at phenomena, Brian Street in 1984, writing about literacy in different cultures, suggests that an ideological view of literacy is more useful. This means recognizing that literacy in different societies has different meanings, different functions. He did his research in Algeria, and he saw that literacy in Algeria means something very different from literacy in the UK. The alternative is an autonomous view, which believes that there is only one possible set of behaviors appropriate relating to literacy. But in my case, I'm suggesting we can apply it to higher education. An autonomous view says the same criteria can be employed for judging success and failure in all higher education systems. I prefer the ideological view, which says we must be very careful looking at different higher education systems. Each society has its own requirements of higher education. Universities are unlikely to have universally relevant roles. So here I just took 7 extracts from different sources in Indonesia and the UK. I'm not to tell you which are which. We don't have time to look at them in detail, but I asked people, or I looked for statements of what universities are for. And there is a huge range of ideas. The first one says higher education must play a dynamic role in modernizing the population. Second one says universities must preserve knowledge, add to knowledge, and disseminate knowledge. The third one is interesting. One of the factors which motivates someone to become a university lecturer is that by doing so, one expects that one's children will be accepted as students in the institution where one is working, and so on and so on. near the end, universities focus primarily on measurable criteria for use in university rankings. More specifically, it's just the total number of academic works indexed by Scopus. You can guess which country that came from. And then the last one, a global university. We change the world, we solve the world's problems. This one is interesting, I think, because it's not claiming to be of world's class in terms of numbers or publications. It's interpreting its responsibility as helping the world. The job of the university is solving the world's problems. I think this is very interesting. Another point that I'd like to make, but we're not going to have time to talk about it, is that it seems to me that universities in Indonesia seem to be reproducing themselves. The fact that almost all lecturers in universities are graduates of the same university indicates that. Next, what impact do universities have? I think a lot of research needs to be done here, and there are lots of different aspects that we could look at. Lifetime earnings of a lecturer, the health of lecturers, are they healthier than people doing other jobs? What research do they do? What impact does research have? Does being involved in universities change people's politics? What likelihood is there of being corrupt if you've been to university? A few years ago, I asked KPK if they had statistics about whether people found guilty of corruption were graduates or not, but KPK said they didn't have any data. And then generosity. As you may know, for the last 3 years running, Indonesia has been found to be the most generous. Indonesians are the most generous people in the world. I think I know that. I've experienced that many, many times. The question is, do people become more generous having been to university, or equally generous, or God forbid, less generous? And then another aspect that I think would be interesting would be to look at entrepreneurism. To what extent do university graduates take risks in making a living? To what extent are they willing to be entrepreneurs? The example that I'm showing you is of a tiny coffee shop in Surabaya, run by husband and wife, who are both very elderly. And in order to manage something like this, you need to be entrepreneurial. Nobody will guarantee you, nobody will provide help if you have financial problems. You have to do it all yourself. Is university education helping to develop entrepreneurism? Or is there a possibility that, having been through education, higher education, people are less willing to take risks, less willing to be entrepreneurs, and would prefer to be working in large organizations where somebody will be looking after them? Who does research now? We've seen that probably the overloaded professors don't have much time to do research, but research is being done. And I can see it being done by a lot of lembaga, especially in the social sciences, lembaga, yayasan, NGOs, some of which are extremely productive. LP3AS has been around for 50 years and has published a huge amount of research. It used to publish the journal Prisma, which was always full of interesting stuff. Another one, new development, is The Conversation, which says that it promotes discipline ilmiah gaya journalistic, and from the couple of issues that I've seen, it does exactly that. The Antinomy Institute was founded by Bapak Taufikur Rahman, who I hope is here. He wrote a response to Peter Carey's talk, which was published in Kompas a few days ago. And Pak Taufik's article has itself attracted a lot of attention. And his Institute for Science, Philosophy and Religion is clearly doing very useful and important research. Another is Center for Strategic and International Studies. So research is going on, and it's going on outside universities. I'm not saying that there isn't research in any universities, but there is a lot of it going on outside. And one of the many interesting aspects is that some of the people who are doing this research in these organizations are in fact university lecturers. So is it the case that people are freer to do research outside universities than inside universities? This is something else that needs investigating. I don't know. Nearly finished. When we interview people or ask people about phenomena like this, people will often make very strong statements about things which they believe to be the case, unquestionable. A few years ago, very recently, together with several colleagues, I did research looking at why universities in Indonesia are so enthusiastically pursuing a policy of EMI, using English as the medium of instruction. And we heard very frequently people in universities saying, EMI is needed to ensure quality. In other words, if you teach chemistry students chemistry through English, the quality will be better. EMI is needed for international accreditation. EMI is necessary for international communication. Students can effectively absorb English from their subject lecturers. All of these are wrong, and we can say definitively that they're wrong. Some of the top universities in the world don't use English. There are universities in France, Japan, and elsewhere, which use their own languages to teach their students. It's not the case that that universities have to teach through English in order to be accredited internationally. So we need, when we're doing ethnography in universities, we need to keep a lookout for things like this, statements that people make, and they're very convinced of the truthfulness of these statements may actually not be the case. And very, very widely held myth is that Scopus is an indicator of quality and ISBN is an indicator of quality. These are just wrong. Scopus collects data about numbers, how many publications have been published, and ISBN is just a number which, well, in the UK, I've organized ISBN numbers for various publications, research reports, and so on. It's just a formality. I think in Indonesia, you have to go to Perpustakaan Nasional. Finally, with 9 minutes left, here are a few tentative discussion points that have arisen. Describing systems of higher education in different contexts should not be judgmental. Universities in different contexts will always have different characteristics. The participants involved in these institutions may not be aware of these different functions. It's very common that people will assume that a university in country X is doing the same things as a university in country Y, or that a professor in context A is the same as a professor in context B. And if this is the case, if these differences occur, then there are interesting implications for the international accreditation of higher education. How is it possible for universities in one country to accredit universities in another country? My proposal is that we need a lot of research into all of this in order to understand what higher education in Indonesia is doing. And I suggest 6 parallel ethnographies carried out by PhD students. So we need a lot of money to fund 6 PhD students. And they should be working on their own areas of investigation, but also in constant contact with each other. So the 6 resulting ethnographies would be interrelated in some way. And here are some possibilities. This is not final by any means, of things that could be investigated. The impacts of universities, the relationship between researchers within universities and in other types of organization, relationships between students and academics, and perhaps the relationship between national ideology, Pancasila, and what universities are expected to do and are actually doing. So, fifth, Sila is keadilan sosial bagi seluruh rakyat Indonesia. To what extent is higher education in Indonesia achieving that? And that's what I've got to say. And I'll be very happy to hear responses. Is anybody there?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Harold Coleman, for the very insightful presentation. I just would like to appreciate the topic of what might the ethnography of higher education in Indonesia look like. We are now very much enlightened by your experience. We are now entering the question and answer session. Please, for the participants who want to raise your question, you can comment in the chat box or press hand for you to be chosen to directly ask Harold Coleman. I see here in the chat box, there are some questions raised by the participants. Firstly, from Alfia Dania, she asked about the tips and tricks for how research can pass and be indexed by the Scopus.
Okay, I'll answer that one. It's not a matter of passing. Scopus doesn't make judgments. There is nobody in Scopus in the Netherlands evaluating research or evaluating articles. They simply count how many articles have been published in different journals and different conference proceedings. For some reason in Indonesia, there is a perception that Scopus in some way is a sign of high quality. There's nowhere else in the world that has this understanding. Tips and tricks for publishing research, do the research. The most important thing is do the research, have something to say. It's not a matter of fulfilling requirements to publish 5 articles. It's a matter of doing something that needs to be investigated and then sharing your findings with other people. I believe this very strongly. You need to be excited about the research that you're doing. You need to have ideas that you want to explore. You need to want to share your findings with other people. That's what doing research means. And don't worry about Scopus.
Okay.
Next one.
Okay, the next. From Desi Safitri, she asked about, in Indonesia, to become a professor, there must be a credit score assessment related to the true dharma of higher education. Is there a credit rating in the UK too, or is there another system?
Yeah, right. As I tried to show in the talk, comparing the job advertisements for 2 professors in the UK, there is no formal system. There's no credit rating at all in higher education. To become professor, the main thing is to be well known as a researcher. You must be famous as a researcher. That's the only thing. And maybe be willing to do some teaching, and maybe willing to do a bit of management in the department. But overwhelmingly, the requirement is to do research. And the research is not evaluated in a mechanistic way. It's evaluated by reputation. If people read your publications, if you're often cited in other people's publications, if you're often invited to give talks in other parts of the country or other countries, this is evidence that you're highly regarded, and that's what universities want to see. So there's no credit rating at all.
Okay, thank you. Another question from Linda Zakia. In Indonesia, social tolerance is quite high because of Indonesian culture, which is mutual cooperation. What about the culture in the UK regarding social tolerance? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you're right. Social tolerance is very high. Mutual cooperation is very, very high. The culture in the UK is not. It's different. I'm no longer British. I no longer have a British passport, so I can say what I want to say. But it's clear there is a huge difference in mutual cooperation and tolerance. But what's the relevance for the subject of doing an ethnography in higher education? Maybe Ibu Linda can explain why did you ask that question?
Yeah, maybe about the multicultural education in higher education in Indonesia.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Gotong royong, how well?
Oh, gotong royong. Yeah. Maybe in doing assignments.
Doing assignment, yeah. Teamwork.
Yeah, students cooperate a lot with each other, don't they?
Yeah.
That's not the same. People are more individualistic in the UK, and maybe unwilling to share their work with each other. Okay, next one.
Another question from Sujarwo. In Indonesia, only a small number of people have higher education up to the doctoral level due to limited funds. What about the situation in the UK?
Sorry, I can't see the question.
Oh
yeah, because of limited funds.
Yeah.
In the UK, it's not easy getting funding for PhD. There are no automatic PhD funds. Some universities.
There is no scholarship there.
Yeah, some universities offer scholarships, but there are no fixed scholarships from the government.
Okay.
Individual universities will offer scholarships. Some other organizations may offer scholarships, but that's because they want the research to be done. They want to find out about something, and so they will pay somebody to do a PhD because they need the research findings. So, for example, the Ministry of Health may commission research, and to do that, they offer a PhD fellowship so that the research can be done. So it's not easy. It's much easier to get funding for first degree. It's a bit more difficult to get funding for masters, and it's not at all easy to get funding for PhD.
Okay, another question, Hywel. What should be done to develop the quality of higher education in Indonesia? What do you think?
As I said at the beginning, I'm an ethnographer. Ethnographers give their findings to policy makers, and policy makers make decisions. I'm reluctant to answer this question because I've been trying to avoid saying anything about quality. What I'm trying to say is that higher education in Indonesia is different from higher education in the UK, different from higher education in Russia. If we're looking at Indonesia, somebody will have to decide what are the criteria. Well, what counts as quality in higher education in Indonesia? I haven't seen anything yet, unless it's Scopus. Is that the definition of high quality?
Hywel, another question from Maman Suryaman. Firstly, how to measure the quality of lecturers at Leeds University in particular, and maybe Europe in general. In Indonesia, it is measured by publication in internationally reputable journals, such as Scopus and Web of Science. Secondly, what are the substance benefit of publication in international reputable journals so that it becomes a parameter for determining whether Indonesian lecturers are entitled to hold the title of professor?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. The first one is to become a lecturer and to be promoted in the university in the UK. You need to have a balance between teaching. We must have a good reputation. Students are often asked to evaluate their lecturers. So you need to have a good reputation as a teacher. You need to have good relations with your students, but you must also be active as a researcher. And you need to have a balance of those two. I know that publications accredited by Scopus are important, but as I said before, I don't believe that's meaningful. The benefits of publications in international reputable journals is that you're sharing your research findings. You've done some research, you have findings which you consider to be interesting. You want to share them with other people. They may benefit from your research. You may want feedback from other researchers, and all of this can be done through journals. So it's not simply a matter of publishing in a journal full stop. It's publishing in a journal so as to communicate with other researchers. And that's the joy of publishing in a journal, because you can see how many people are reading your article. You can see how they respond to your research. They can give you feedback. It's really exciting.
Okay. Another question from Peter Carey. Scopus and Elsevier publishers have run into issues to do with greed. The entire board of the Journal of AI has just resigned, all 140 of them, because of greed.
Yeah, well, it's not surprising. I think Peter and I share the same opinion about Scopus.
Okay. Another question from Darius: how to measure the relationship between corruption and university education?
Right. This is intriguing. Although KPK told me they don't have data, it must be possible to find data. But it would need a PhD student to do the research. Look back through all the records of cases where people have been prosecuted for corruption and found guilty, and then find out about their education. And then it should be possible to see how many have graduated from university and how many have not. I can't predict what the answer will be, but it would be very interesting to see what the result is, if anybody has the courage to do that.
Yes.
Another comment for Peter.
I think we should move to another question. When you first came to Indonesia, did you experience culture shock? Because there are cultural differences between Indonesia and the UK, and how do you deal with it?
I experienced huge culture shock when I first came to Indonesia. In 1972, I was sent to Bengkulu to teach English in Dinas Kesehatan. Bengkulu in 1972 was like a village on the next to the Indian Ocean. Nobody spoke English. I couldn't communicate with anybody. there were all sorts of things that I didn't understand. And I know I made many mistakes in the way that I behaved. And it took a long time. And I'm still learning. I mean, I've been here for more than 40 years, and I think I'm still learning. So I think a willingness to be open, a willingness to admit that you've made mistakes, and not making judgments. I think that's important. Not criticizing or condemning, but saying, here's something I don't understand. How can I learn what it means? But it's not easy.
Okay. Another question from Tasrif Kit. In recent years, with the development of digital technologies, ethnography has also adapted to new research methods, such as digital ethnography, in which researchers use social media, online platform, and other digital technologies, such as data sources, to study human culture and behavior in digital context. What do you think about that?
Yeah, good. The more different types of, the more different ways of gathering data, the better, I think. I have no problem with that. I think it's all very useful.
Okay. Another from Andi Rosa, publishing articles in journals, authors often have to pay to journals, including Scopus index journals. In our opinion, ideally, journal managers have special funds from the government or they are independent so that writers do not have to pay when they have their article to be sent to the journal in questions. Shouldn't the person compiling the article be paid because the author has contributed to the development of science? What do you think about the current system?
I mean, the journals that I'm familiar with, which are published in the UK, in Australia, in America, the author never has to pay anything to the publisher. The funding comes mainly from universities who subscribe to the journals so that they can put the journals in their libraries, either physically or online. So the universities must be willing to subscribe to journals. People within universities can access journals free. People from outside universities may have to subscribe, and journals are very often very expensive. So it's not easy for independent researchers to access journals. There is a relatively new arrangement where articles can be published open access. In that case, the publisher, the journal publisher, asks the university which employs the author pay an extra fee, to pay a fee. And then it becomes open access, which means that anybody can read the journal. What were you saying? Journal managers have special funds from the government. No, I don't think so. As far as I know, journals are published by publishers or by academic organizations, professional organizations, but not from the government. Shouldn't the person compiling the article be paid? I've never heard of that. I've never heard of journal authors being paid.
Okay, I will. Another question from Alec. Can we? Firstly, how do educational institutions in Indonesia address issues of access, equity, and inclusion in higher education, particularly in relation to marginalized communities, minority languages, and regional disparities? Secondly, what are the emerging trends and challenges in higher education in Indonesia, and how are they influencing language, society, and educational practices within this institution?
Let me read the questions again. How do
Okay.
educational institutions address issues of access, equity, and inclusion in higher education, particularly in relation to marginalized communities, minority languages, and regional disparities? What are the emerging trends and challenges in higher education in Indonesia, and how are they influencing language, society, and educational practices within these institutions? I think these are very good research questions. I think you should investigate these questions yourself. The one that I'm particularly interested in is minority languages, because this is my my background. And as far as I know, minority languages are never used as a medium of instruction in higher education in Indonesia. They ought to be used as a medium of instruction in primary schools. UNESCO recommends that they should be used as a medium of instruction to the end of primary school. It's very rare. That's very rarely the case, and I've never heard of that happening in higher education. But going back to one of the points that I was making earlier, that the pool of people who are available to study in higher education is very limited, because many people have not finished secondary school, or they may not be fully literate. And people who speak minority languages are disadvantaged in that respect. I think this is a very interesting question for investigation. UNESCO in Bangkok is very interested in mother tongue-based multilingual education, and I think they would be very enthusiastic if somebody wanted to investigate this. And your second question, emerging trends and challenges in higher education. Yeah, the quantification of everything that happens in universities is an emerging trend, unfortunately. I think that's all I've got to say about that.
Okay, two more questions. Hairul, from Budi Gunawan, technological advances make people more dependent in life. What do you think about students who are too dependent on technology and social media, so that it has an impact on the moral and ethical aspect of their life?
Waduh. I think this is outside my area of expertise. Who decides what is too dependent, and how can you tell whether something is too dependent?
Maybe from observation.
Yeah, but that's a judgment by the observer.
Yeah.
And how can we measure the impact on moral and ethical aspects? This is another research question. This is a whole number of research questions. I think there are many people here who should be doing research.
Yeah. Okay. Another question from Eliana. Ethnographic research requires high honesty and diligence from researchers. This is difficult to find in Indonesia because the majority of Indonesian scientists and researchers do not read much and still commit plagiarism. How do you solve this, Hairul? Thank you.
You have a negative view of your colleagues. Yes, it's true. It's true. Ethnography requires high honesty and openness. Is it really that difficult to find? I have many colleagues in different universities all over Indonesia whom I respect tremendously. I publish many articles and chapters in books with Indonesian colleagues, so I'm not too pessimistic. But people, it's true, people do not read much. There was a statistic I was going to give you, which I forgot, about the library of a university where I did a survey a few years ago. And I asked the librarian how many undergraduates borrow books from the library, and the number was amazingly low, something like 2 per year or something like that.
Okay.
Well, maybe the answer is the people higher up need to be setting good examples. Lecturers need to motivate their students to do research. Senior lecturers need to motivate and guide their junior colleagues. Professors need to be inspiring. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. It is the time to end this session. Thank you, Hairul Coleman, for sharing your thoughts and expertise on this. We truly appreciate your kind and intensive support to conduct this monthly international webinar. Thank you very much for the very insightful session, and thank you for the questions. And once again, thank you for all participants who have actively involved in monthly international webinar. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Don't forget that this is a monthly international webinar, so please keep yourself updated by checking on our website. See you. Assalamualaikum.
Ibu Arita, can I just make an announcement about the next session? We have 2 more meetings planned in June. The meeting will be on Thursday, the 15th of June. The speaker is Nugraheni Zacharias, who used to be a lecturer at Satyawacana University and is now a lecturer at Pennsylvania State University. So it will be interesting to hear her experiences of moving moving from an Indonesian university to an American one. Because of the time difference, we will start much later at 1900, 7 o'clock in the evening. And then Thursday, the 20th of July, the speaker is called Douglas Blackstock. He's the president of the European Association for Quality Assurance in Higher Education, ENCA. He hasn't given me a title yet, but I think it'd be very interesting to hear his views of international accreditation, because as I was trying to suggest in my talk, there are big issues, in my opinion, about the concept of international accreditation. So that's 15th of June and 20th of July, but we'll send announcements around with details. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Hairul. Thank you for all participants. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bye-bye.
Waalaikumsalam.